Question ID is 1458. Which of the following was recently reported to be the first mammal to have become extinct as a result of climate change? So we all know that extinction means when some organism has been wiped off the face of the earth. Now, extinction has long been a natural process. Extinction of species has occurred um, over 100 of millions of years, because when the continents, they broke into parts, when oceans were formed, or when the mountains were formed. During these processes, species became extinct over a time period, over a long time period. But recently, it has been seen that the species which are being extinct today, which are becoming extinct today, the rate of extinction has been 1,000 to 10,000 times more than the natural rate of extinction. What does this tell us? So this type of extinction seems quite unnatural. So unnatural, why? Because of majorly the human activities, the industrial activities, agricultural activities, which have brought upon global warming. Due to this, there's a change in climate. Change in climate is the changing of weather patterns, and it affects food production in different parts of the world. It affects wildlife. It is the cause that the oceans, the sea levels has been rising, that the glaciers have been melting. So all this is due to climate change. So one effect of climate change is the threat to wildlife, that the species are becoming extinct. So recently there was a mammal which became extinct as a result of climate change. So we can classify it as a natural extinction. The mammal was Bramble K. melomes. It is a rodent found in Australia, and this is a mammal, and it has now been extinct. So the answer is the first one. As far as the other options are concerned, Gangetic river dolphin, it is the national aquatic animal of India. It is also a mammal, and the conservation status for this dolphin is endangered. Endangered means it has not been extinct, but it is in the danger of being so. The next option is Malaga giant rat. Again, it is a rodent. It is found near Madagascar in an island. So it is also an endangered species. Next is Tapanuli orangutan. It is an orangutan, and it is found near Indonesia. And the conservation status is that it is critically endangered. That if something is not done immediately, it will soon become extinct. So our answer is the only mammal which is extinct out of these is the first one. Next question is 1457. In a lake, reducing the population of a fish which feeds on plankton was followed by a decline in the rate of primary productivity. This is consistent with which of the following hypotheses regarding the regulation of primary productivity? Bottom-up control, eutrophication, top-down control, and trophic pyramid. Now, first we see what is primary productivity. Primary productivity, it is the rate at which plants and other photosynthetic organisms, they produce organic compounds in an ecosystem. So it is rate of production of organic compounds. So plants and photosynthetic organisms, they are responsible for the primary productivity. Now what is happening in this question? That there's a population of fish which feeds on planktons. So fish, they generally feed on zooplanktons. Zooplanktons, they further feed on phytoplanktons. And phytoplanktons, since they are photosynthetic, they are responsible for primary productivity. Now what is happening that this fish which was eating the zooplanktons, it was removed. The population of zooplanktons on which the fish fed, it increased. Now when the population of zooplanktons increased, they started feeding on the phytoplanktons. So the population of phytoplanktons as a result, it decreased. Since the population of phytoplanktons decreased, photosynthesis decreased, and the rate of production of organic materials, organic compounds, it also decreased. So primary productivity also decreased as a result. Now what is happening here? Here the top predator, here the fish is the top predator in this food chain. So any change in the population of this top predator is bringing upon a change in all the other subsequent levels, right? So this is known as top-down control. So in ecology, when a top predator, it controls the structure or population dynamics of the ecosystem, it is known as the top-down control. Okay. Now, there's also one term known as the bottom-up control. What happens is, in the bottom-up control, when the nutrient supply, productivity, and type of primary producers, like the phytoplanktons or the algae, they control the ecosystem or the entire trophic levels, the food chains. When they control the primary producers, they control the dynamics of the ecosystem, then it is known as the bottom-up control. Here in this example, what is happening? The top predator, it is controlling the dynamics of this ecosystem. So the answer is top-down control. I've explained the bottom-down control. Now, what is eutrophication? Eutrophication is when a body of water is overly rich with minerals and nutrients, and it results in overgrowth of algae, which are known as algal blooms over the surface of the water body. So this is known as eutrophication, and it may deplete oxygen levels in the water body, and it affects the fauna of the lake or the water body. So eutrophication is again not the answer. The fourth one is given as trophic pyramid. The trophic pyramid is something like this. It is a pyramid of sorts, and it is also known as an ecological pyramid. There are many kinds of pyramids, like biomass, pyramid of biomass, pyramid of energy. So what happens is the different trophic levels, they are marked, and according to the energy, they are passing on to the other trophic levels. So it is a graphical representation. Trophic pyramid is a graphical representation of this food chain. And in an energy pyramid, it shows the flow of energy at each trophic level. So the answer to this question is top-down control. Question 1528. Which of the following is not a mechanism for species coexistence? Now, in nature, many species, they exist together in the same habitat, and they share resources. But if there are limited resources, then how do these species coexist? And why do they don't just outcompete each other or make the other species coexist? So this is what species coexistence means, that they live together even when they share resources, they share the same habitat. So there are certain mechanisms which help in species coexistence. So what are they? The first is niche differentiation. Now, there's a fundamental difference between the habitat and the niche of an organism. The habitat is the place where it lives. the space that occupies, whereas the niche is the different interactions with the living and non-living beings. What it eats, where it lives, what interactions does it have with other organisms in the same habitat. That is known as the niche of the organism. Now, for example, like in a forest habitat, some trees may grow very tall in order to get direct sunlight and avoid competition by other trees. Then some plants are shade loving, so they like to live under the canopies. Some plants are vines, they are climbers, they climb onto other plants for obtaining nutrition from them. And some plants, they avoid all this competition between the other plants by becoming carnivorous, such as the pitcher plant. So this is what is known as niche differentiation. Like the forest is the habitat. But in this habitat, there are different trees and they have different niches. Like some are sun-loving, tall trees. Then others are shade-loving, small trees. Then some are climbers, vines. Some are carnivorous. So this is the difference between a habitat and a niche. Niche differentiation means even if the organisms are in the same habitat, they have the same limiting resources, they occupy different niches so that they can coexist with each other. The second is niche complementarity. Uh, it means that if the competitor species use the same form of resources, then they may differ in some other dimension. Like if they have the same habitat and the same niche, then how do they coexist? For example, all the plant species which are pollinated by hummingbirds, they flower at different time of the year. So they use the same resource, that is the hummingbird, for their pollination. But since they use one resource, they differ in the second dimension of using that resource. For example, to avoid competition, in this example, to avoid competition, different plants, they flower at different times. Okay, so they occupy the same habitat, they occupy the same niche, but if they are if they are using one form of a resource, some other species would be using other form of the resource. So this is known as niche complementarity. Now another mechanism for species coexistence is that the amount of limiting resources, if the amount is higher than the number of species, that means there is an abundance of resource. Like in this example, there is an abundance of resource in this option. Due to this abundance, the number of species that are occupying the same habitat, same niche, they can happily live with each other, they can happily easily coexist because there is less competition between them. Competition occurs when the resources are limiting. So if there is abundance of resources, so there is less competition and different species, they can coexist. So the mechanisms for species coexistence, first is niche differentiation, that is the same habitat but different niches. Second is niche complementarity, which means the habitat is same, the niche is the same, but the different species, they use different forms or different dimensions of the same resource. Third is that if the resources are in abundance than the population, and they are not limiting. So this leaves us with niche overlap. What is niche overlap? It means that there are two species that are in severe competition with each other. For example, there are two parasites which have the same host. So they have the same host There is no niche complementarity here, no niche differentiation. Same host, a single host, that means the resources will be limiting after a time period. So these will come in competition with each other. So this means that this niche overlap is not a mechanism for species coexistence. So the answer is niche overlap. Next question is question 1526. The question is, in the graph below, large boxes, which are P, Q, R, and S, they represent a region, whereas smaller boxes represent habitats. Now there are labels given S1, S2, S3 above each small box. These represent the species present in the given habitat, denoted by that box. In the above graphs, choose the option which correctly depicts the regions which show maximum alpha and maximum beta diversity, respectively. Now, diversity means different number of species of flora and fauna in a particular habitat. There are three types of diversities, namely alpha diversity, beta diversity, and gamma diversity. So alpha diversity is the species richness of a particular habitat. It refers to diversity within a particular area or ecosystem, and it is simply expressed by the number of species in an ecosystem. For example, you have a garden with 3 species, so the alpha diversity will simply be 3. So it represents the number of species in a particular ecosystem. Now, coming to beta diversity, it is the change in species diversity between different ecosystems. So beta diversity is when you are comparing two different ecosystems, and you are measuring the number of species, unique species in those two ecosystems. For example, you have ecosystem A and another ecosystem B. Ecosystem A has 5 different species and ecosystem B has 3 different species. So the beta diversity here will be 8. During calculation of beta diversity, we only count the unique species present in them. Another is gamma diversity. It is the measure of overall diversity for different ecosystems within a region. For example, in your locality, there are different number of species. They might be in a park, in a garden, in a lake, in a pond, in a lawn, in a house. So gamma diversity is the overall number of species in all the ecosystems in a particular habitat. Let me explain this using this table. Here you can see that there are 3 different ecosystems. First is garden, lake, and another is a lawn in a house, in front of a house. So we are counting the number of species. These are the species A to G, A to H. These are the number of species. So in a garden, we have A, B, C, and D. In a lake, we have D, E, F, and in the lawn, we have F, G, H. Now, if you have to calculate the alpha diversity here. So in the garden, the alpha diversity is 4 because there are 4 number of species. In the lake, the alpha diversity will be 3 because 3 number of species. And in the lawn, the alpha diversity will again be 3. Now, if we have to calculate the beta diversity, so beta diversity is comparing 2 ecosystems. So first, if we compare garden and lake, here we have to count the unique number of species. This D is common in both, so we won't count this species because this is not unique to both of them. So in garden, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So there are 5. The beta diversity here is 5 in garden versus lake. Next, we take lake versus lawn. Here, F is common between them, so we won't count this. So in the lake, 1, 2, 3, 4. So lake versus lawn, beta diversity is 4. Now we take lawn versus garden. Here, none of the species are similar, are common. So 4 in the garden and 3 in the lawn, that makes it 7. So beta diversity here is 7. That is how we calculate beta diversity. It is the comparison of 2 different ecosystems, or maybe 3, maybe 4. But when ecosystems are being compared, in that case, we use the beta diversity. Next is the gamma diversity. So gamma diversity is the overall number of species in a particular habitat. So here the overall number of species are these all, the species that we are considering. They may be present, they may not be, they may be present in maybe 2 ecosystems, maybe all 3 of them, but it has to be present in at least one of them in the particular habitat. So gamma diversity here, which is the overall number of species that we are considering, is 8. Now, this clears up alpha, beta, and gamma diversity. In the question, they're asking, which of these graphs they correctly depict the regions which show maximum alpha and maximum beta diversity. So maximum alpha diversity will be in the box in which there are maximum number of species. We simply have to count the species. So there must be maximum number of species. So here 1 2 1 2 1 2 1 2, 2 species, S1 S2 S1 S2, again 2 species, 1 2 3 4 5 species are here, and here we have 3 into 4, 12 species. Correct. Here we have 8 species, here we have 4 species, and here we have 1 2 3 4 5 species. So the maximum number of species are present in this box Q. So the maximum alpha diversity is present in this box. Now the maximum beta diversity. Beta diversity is the difference when we're comparing 2 or 3 or 4. There might be unique species, the maximum number of unique species present in them. So here the maximum number of unique species are just 2. Here the maximum number of unique species are 3. Here the maximum number of unique species are again 2. And here the maximum number of unique species is 1 2 3 4 5. So 5 species. So the beta diversity is maximum in the S box. So alpha and beta respectively are maximum in Q and S. That makes it this option. So this option is correct for this question. Question is 1529. It says that a small number of mice, approximately 10, are introduced into an uninhabited island. The population grows exponentially initially, and after 3 years, it reaches a population size of 520, after which the population becomes stable. At what point would you expect the population to attain the highest growth rate? The options are when mice population was first introduced, when the population size is 260, the population growth rate remains constant throughout, and last option is when the population size reaches 520. Now, as we see here, that it first grows exponentially and after some time it becomes stable. So this population is clearly following a logistic curve, such as this. Now in the logistic curve, the initial growth rate, and this is the growth rate, which is also known as the log phase. So the log phase is when the population size, the growth rate is extremely high. And this is when it reaches, it's about to reach, almost reaches its carrying capacity. And this is where it becomes stable. So this population follows this table, and so we can know that we must find this log phase. So let's look at the options. The first is when the mice population was first introduced. Now, when the mice population was first introduced, it must have been in this phase at this point, which is clearly not the highest growth rate. So this option is incorrect. Next, when the population size is 260. Now, 260, if we double 260, we get 520. So clearly, if we find out the percentage growth rate, so 520 minus 260, that means the current population minus the previous population divided by the previous population. Here we get a ratio of 1. If we convert it into percentage, it is equal to 100%. So here at this point, when the population is 260, we can see 100% growth in population. And clearly, this is somewhere at this point. So this is the correct answer when the population size is 260. Let's look at the third option. The population growth rate remains constant throughout. If it follows the logarithmic phase growth curve, so we can see here through the graph that this is not a graph wherein we can say the population growth rate is constant. It is not constant as it is changing as per the curve of the graph. So this option is also incorrect. When the population size reaches 520, the question says that when the population size reaches 520, it becomes stable. So here, somewhere here is the 520 population size. So clearly this time period or this phase is also not the one in which the population is attaining highest growth rate. So this option is also incorrect. So the correct option here is when the population size is 260, because clearly it is in the log phase of its growth and 100% growth can be seen in this phase. So the answer is option 2 when the population size is 260. Next question is question 1530. It states that an area of patch 1 is 2000 meters square with a resource density of 5 units per meter square. Area of patch 2 is 3000 meters square with a resource density of 10 units per meter square. As per the theory of ideal free distribution, organisms distribute themselves such that the expected ratio of abundance of organisms in the two patches will be, options are 1:2, 2:3, 1:3, 3:2. Now, what is ideal free distribution? It is a way in which animals distribute themselves among several patches of resources. So if there are different patches of resources, in some patches the resources are more, in other patches the resources are less. So in the patches in which the resources are less, there'll be less animals. In the patches where there are more resources, there will be more animals. So this theory states that number of individual animals that will aggregate in various patches is proportional to the amount of resources available in each. So to find out the proportion of animals, the abundance of animals in the two patches, we just have to calculate the abundance of resources in these two patches. The same ratio as the amount of as the abundance of resources will give us the abundance of animals that will be present in each patch. So how will we calculate the resource density? In patch 1, it is 2000 meters square and the resource density is 5 units per meter square. So in the entire patch, there will be 5 into 2000, which is 10,000 units of resources. Now in patch 2, using the same method, patch 2 is spread across 3000 meters square with 10 units per meter square. So the total number of resources will be 3000 into 10, which makes it 30,000 units. So we have to calculate the ratio of patch 1 to patch 2. So the ratio will be 10,000 divided by 30,000, which is 1:3. And this is the same ratio in which the organisms will be present in the two patches as per the ideal free distribution theory. So according to this, 1:3 is here. So option 3 is correct.